Victory in Jesus.
Amen.
Victory in Jesus.
Amen.
Hold up on your victory.
Services in the Ad Council.
WOKB, Winter Garden, Orlando.
Welcome to Real Family Talk with your host, Jay Real, where we talk about real issues facing us today. Enjoy the show. Real Family Talk. Hello. Welcome to another week of Real Family Talk. This is your host, Jay Real. It's Tuesday, y'all. It's Tuesday. Real Family Talk, 9 p.m. I hope everybody's having a wonderful evening. I know I am. As I say every week, I'm always excited on Tuesdays. Let me go ahead and welcome the panel here. How you doing tonight, guys? I got Jeremy's in the building. How you doing over there, Jeremy?
I'm good. What's going on, family?
Oh, we got Mr. Micah King is in the building tonight. How you doing, Mr. Micah King?
What they do.
What they do. We also got Miss Monica is here. How you doing, Miss Monica?
Doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. And Miss McCrae is in the building. Hello, Miss McCrae.
Good evening.
So we are all here. It's another Tuesday night. Are y'all as excited as I am?
It's Tuesday. I'm excited.
Always, right?
I'm excited.
Just to get it like extra energy. 9 o'clock comes and it's like, ah! All right, let's go ahead and jump into the show. We got a lot of interesting things to talk about tonight. The first thing I want to do is I want to going on this evening, and I had to leave early because they were running kind of late today. But they had at the Experience Christian Center, they had some debates tonight. Tonight's debates were for state attorney's office for Orange Osceola County. The gentleman who showed up was Mr. Jeff Ashton. He actually showed up. Lawson Lamar did not come out. I don't remember if they gave a specific reason. He did send a representative out to at least show that some of his people were in the house, but he did not physically come out. Also out there were some candidates from Senate District. The House of Representatives, District Florida 45 for the Florida House of Representatives. Shannon Curry was there and Randolph Bracey. In the House as well was the candidates for the Florida House of Representatives for District 46. Miss Rosalind Johnson came out, Sean Bradford came out, Jason Henry came out, and Bruce Antone was there as well. So all those individuals there to debate. As always, the debate was moderated by Miss Monica May and Mr. Ali Braswell. And Ms. Carol Davis also spoke about the Affordable Care Act, which is where I want to start making some of my comments about the debate tonight. So Mrs. Carol Davis, who is part of the League of Women Voters, came up to speak about the Affordable Care Act, and she basically just kind of highlighted some of the benefits to the healthcare law. And we've heard these things before as far as pre-existing conditions not being able to be denied for pre-existing conditions. The fact that if you are, you can stay on your parents' insurance now until the age of 26. And, you know, just these kind of general things that we've heard before. Where I kind of took issue with some of the things that she said is when she introduced herself as nonpartisan. And I just, you know, listening to her talk and kind of highlight the Affordable Health Care Act, you know, I don't have a problem with people presenting the information. But I do take issue when people present themselves as nonpartisan, and when you hear them speak about what they're talking about, they clearly come across as being partisan. You can tell what she believes, who she believes in, and who she's voting for now and in the future. And that came across in everything she presented about the Healthcare Act. I think if you're going to, you know, give an overall general picture of it, then you should present all sides to the healthcare, the Supreme Court ruling that happened a couple weeks ago, as well as some of the potential negative things that could come about as a result of the Affordable Health Care Act. And certainly there are potentials for negatives, just like there's a lot of potentials for positive. And so, just bring across that if you're going to be nonpartisan. and not just come from one particular side, not just show your advocacy for one particular house, if you will. Okay. So that's that. Jeff Ashton came out as well. Like I said, Lawson Lamar was there. Never seen this gentleman face to face. And one thing I will say about Jeff Ashton comes across as being very upbeat and passionate about the state attorney's office. One of the things he highlighted was the fact that Lawson Lamar has basically run unopposed for about over 20 years now. And so, it's when you think about a candidate who's running unopposed for a particular office, that's a candidate that has no reason to change. So at least at the very least, if Jeff Ashton is your guy, go research Jeff Ashton. Of course, everybody knows his name because he was the one that prosecuted Casey Anthony. But go out, research him, find out what he's about. From what I've seen tonight, he seems to be an individual who is fired up about changing the culture in the state attorney's office, and he may or may not be your guy, but I encourage you to go out and find out about him. He certainly has the sort of fire to bring something different to the state attorney's office and try and include the community more, which is a criticism that he has of Lawson Lamar, of not being able to, or not including the community in the things that are happening within the state attorney's office. So go check him out. I will give him his props. He did an awesome job in debating and answering some of the questions that were asked of him by the moderators and the audience. Moving on to our candidates from the Florida House of Representatives District 45. My first comment here is, when you are going for a job, especially a job that is going to put you as representative of millions or at least thousands of people, you need to dress the part at all times. I understand people do things sometimes, and maybe you were out in the community, I don't know, and you weren't able to, or for what you were doing, I should say, it didn't require you be dressed for the part. But when you stand in front of people to say, here I am, I'm going to represent you, you need to dress for the part. What I'm talking about is candidate Randolph Bracey. He came tonight in a campaign T-shirt and some shorts to the debate. Now, I'm not saying that again, that he's not trying to be taken seriously, but dress the part. Dress the part. If you had something else to do that didn't require you be dressed the part, put in some changing clothes, some khakis and a decent shirt or something. But to show up late, number one, and then to be dressed, not to the part of a candidate for House of Representatives for the state of Florida, I think that just says something. I don't know what it says, and I won't call it to what it says, but I think it speaks something to the seriousness of your candidacy. The other thing I'll note about that particular candidate was when you listen to his answers, he pretty much said the same thing all night. And I applaud him. It's obvious that he's obviously never ran for office before, and so this is his first time, and he's really trying to, it seems, step out there and make a change for the community, and that I applaud him and I commend him. But if you're going to do that, you still need to kind of prepare yourself. You still need to be aware of specifically what the issues are, how to address them, and have solutions that can be tangible, besides telling people that you're going to reach out to the community and find ways for the community to have a voice. That's easy. I mean, I can say that, and I'm not even running. So, I mean, there's no real power in that particular message. It sounds good. It plays well, I'm sure. But there's no power in the message because it doesn't have any bite to it to really reach out and show people how you're going to get that done, especially when you consider all of these Democratic candidates are going to face into a House that is dominated by Republicans. And so how are you, lonely Democrat, lonely man who has no experience writing bills or anything for that matter, are going to really connect to a bipartisanship to really bring dollars and solutions to District 45? That's just a question I have. I'm not saying that he doesn't have a plan. He talks about his ability and his job that he currently does in getting, I guess he works with at-risk students in a school, and he helps those students essentially find jobs. And apparently, according to him, he's very successful at that. But I question, though, again, how does that then translate to now bringing millions of dollars to the Central Florida community to really bring change and impact the community that you would potentially represent? Ms. Shannon Curry was there as well. She's one of the Randolph Bracey's opponent, and she did an effective job as well. She apparently has a lot of experience working in the office of senators and House of Representatives within the state of Florida, so she does bring that background to her, but you can tell too, the one thing I will say is she's very well coached, something Mr. Randolph Bracey was not. You can tell he was really kind of flying off the cuff. And so because of that, she came off a lot more polished than him, although I still kind of wonder for myself anyway what her true impact can be. And none of this matters to me anyway, because I'm in neither one of these districts, so I won't be voting. But for those of you out there that have the potential to vote for these people, again, this is District 45 we're talking about. Check the candidates out, find the one that at least you like the best, and go ahead and vote for them. Remember, the vote takes place August 14th is when you get to decide whether you like Randolph Bracey or Miss Shannon Curry. Moving on to District 46. Fortunately, this is where I had to leave. They started the debate, and so I didn't quite see all of what these candidates had to say. The first thing I'll note, though, is these candidates certainly seem a little bit more polished. It certainly seems like they have a better team surrounding them than some of the previous candidates. And so for that, I commend them. Bruce Antone, he has apparently a lot of experience working within the House. He's worked as a House of Representative himself a number of years ago. He also worked within Buddy Dyer's administration when he was in the House of Representatives as well. So he certainly brings some experience. Jason Henry, shout out to Jason Henry. He'll be stopping by the show next week, by the way. electjasonhenry.com. I'll give him a shout out for coming by. Appreciate that. This is a young man who is again fresh, worked in a lot of politics, and I'll let him tell his story next week. But worked in a lot of politics as a child, and he comes across again very polished. Sounds really good. Rosalind Johnson, here's another newcomer. She has worked in the city as a lawyer, and apparently does a lot of advocating within District 46. And then there's Sean Bradford, who once again apparently has done a lot of advocating within District 46, and apparently is the only candidate who actually lives in District 46. So if those things matter to you, he's your guy, I suppose. But each one of these people came across very effective in the brief minutes that I did get a chance to see them. So I know Jason Henry will be here next week. For the other three, go to their websites, check them out, see what they are about. Some of my criticisms, though, towards the questions, one of the big issues that came up at the debate was the stand your ground law. That seemed to be a huge driving force. Anytime it was mentioned, there was applause and definitely a lot of opinions. Mr. Bruce Antone caught a lot of flack because he was actually in the House of Representatives when the Stand Your Ground law came up for a vote, and it would seem he was not present that day to even give his vote. To his defense, he said that during that time that he was in the House, there were 81 Republicans and 39 Democrats. So vote or not, if they wanted it passed, it was going to pass because the Democrats were just too outnumbered. But my question here is, why are we so focused simply because of one case on one law that really impacts us, I think, very little? I think it's kind of silly to get so caught up in one law simply because, again, it may be used in a case that we think, someone deserves a harsher punishment than what we believe he's going to get. I think that's a loss of focus on our part, and there's bigger issues to worry about than a law that has essentially not really impacted our lives to the point where we need to be focused clearly on that particular law. I don't know. Do you guys have any comments? I mean, do you think stand your ground is this battleground issue that should be addressed in this election?
I don't necessarily think so.
For one, I think I may actually agree with you a little bit.
The shock. The amazement.
But I don't think that it now needs to become the topic for, the year, that this one law needs to have that much, effort being put into it, because it does, like you said, it does cause one case, although it's a tragic thing that happened, and it has caused a lot of uproar in our community. Focusing all our attention on just that is, I don't think, really necessary. What we really need to do is pay more attention to all of the laws so that we don't come across additional issues in the future with other things, instead of just focusing on something that's, it's a done deal. The law is there, so there's not very much that we can do to change that. But making sure other laws, don't impact our community would be better placed for your effort.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Anybody else think stand your ground is this powerful issue that needs to be addressed in this election?
It certainly needs to be looked at. I don't think it's the number one issue, like you were stating before.
I don't think it is an issue.
It has some flaws in it, and it needs to be addressed so that things like this won't happen again, or don't have room to happen again. Someone can't say, oh, I did this because of stand your ground. So this is giving them a chance to see that there are flaws there that need to be looked at. But it's not number one, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I was kind of surprised. I didn't expect Stand Your Ground to kind of take this top. They asked Jeff Ashton about Stand Your Ground and what he thought it was. His opinion was basically he thought that the law wasn't being properly used correctly, was his opinion, not that so much that it needed to be changed. And then other candidates just expressed their disappointment with it. And you can tell it was clear that the moderators obviously agreed that there were flaws in Stand Your Ground. But again, I go back to the fact that this all really stems from one case. One case, and it really doesn't apply to the whole of the Stand Your Ground. And even in that case, Stand Your Ground it hasn't even been argued in front of a judge to be proven that Stand Your Ground is valid in this particular case. Someone just invoked that possibly they were going to use that as a defense, and nothing's been done to that. No judge has said that it is valid in this particular case. So to get all upset and be focused on this particular issue seems to me to be I'll just call it what I think it is, a waste of time. But I'll move on from that. 407-894-1680 is the number. 407-894-1680 is the number if you want to comment on if you were at the debates tonight, or if you want to comment on anything I said tonight, feel free to do so. 407-894-1680 is the number. What we want to move on to, we're going to talk a little bit about the healthcare ruling as well tonight. But before we get there, I wanted to, Congressman Allen West, he is a congressman from the state of Florida, down in the Palm Beach area. He's been he makes the news quite often because he certainly is not afraid to speak his mind as he sees it. And he is a Republican, for those that don't know. He really takes Democrats in general to task, is with some of his comments. And recently he caught a lot of flack, or is catching flack, because of some comments he made about the Social Security disability that has been issued during the Obama tenure here. And if you will, Jeremy, do you have that clip for me? Okay, he doesn't have that clip for me. But basically, I kind of summarized some of what he said. He was talking, looking at the amount of jobs that were created this month, which was approximately 80,000 jobs that were created this month. And then when they look at how many people actually went on disability this month, there was about Social Security disability this month. There's about 86,000 people that went on Social Security disability this month. And then what he was comparing is over since 2009, he was talking about how approximately 2.4 million people have been employed since that time. But if you look at the number of people who are on Social Security disability, that number is around a little over 3 million people. So there's more people who have or who are now receiving Social Security disability than are actually finding jobs. And so his comment was that when you compare the dependency that people are having on government right now, he kind of compared that as saying that it's like a modern day slavery, the dependency on government that people have currently, to say that more people are being funded or supported by the government than are actually finding jobs. It's kind of the summary of his comments over the weekend. And of course, comparing people getting government benefits as being on slavery, that doesn't typically go over well, whether you're Republican or Democrat or whatever you are. And so, of course, he is catching a lot of flack for that. And so that was his comments that he made, 407-894-1680. I'll say this about it. Listening to some of the comments that he's made since he initially made that statement, number one, he was attacked as not supporting Social Security. And so he made a clarification to say that Social Security disability is a lot different than actual Social Security. And so he's not talking about Social Security. He's talking about Social Security disability. The second thing is he's right. A lot of people are being supported currently by the government, and there has been an increase in the tenure of the president. This is all still very true information. And so his comment, of course, is meant to be incendiary. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to catch attention. But I don't believe his actual comment is that he believes these people are slaves. His point is when you are being supported solely by someone and you're not being able to support yourself, you are essentially a slave to that entity. And in this case, if people aren't being able to support themselves, he's saying you are kind of a slave to the government, meaning once the government, or I guess you could paraphrase and say the master, takes away what he's giving you, you're going to have a problem. I know what y'all are thinking. Go ahead. Say what you want to say.
This isn't the first time he's mentioned slave in one of his comments. Last week he said that President Obama does not want you to have self-esteem in getting up and earning and having the title of an American. He'd rather you be a slave. So he likes this word. Mm-hmm. He likes using that analogy of what people are doing and using slavery, and now it's getting himself in trouble.
Yeah. And it looks like he's directing his messages to the black community, because I don't think he would compare, you're not going to mention to a Caucasian person, you're being a slave.
They were never slaves.
Right.
So you can't say that unless they were Jewish.
So I think that, it's just basic, insult to injury for, the black community and how he...
You do know Alan West is a black guy, right?
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
No,
I didn't.
That doesn't mean anything.
Okay, I didn't know.
I completely...
I didn't know that she knew. I didn't know she knew that he was a black man. He is a black guy.
Well, still, it's, just like we talked about using the N-word and African Americans using the N-word towards other African Americans. It still doesn't make it appropriate.
Slave? Yeah. I disagree completely. Like he says, once somebody spoon feeds you after a while and you can't use your arms, what you gonna do when they start spoon feeding you?
I understand that.
I think it was just not an analogy, but
right. I think I don't think he was literally saying
slave. People
are slaves, but it's an analogy to say if you are being supported by someone and that person is your sole support, or at least your major support. In this case, that person's the government is who he's really referring to. Then in essence, you truly are kind of a quote unquote. Again, it's supposed to be sensational, I believe. That's the point.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't sensational, we wouldn't be talking about it, and we wouldn't be talking about the issue of how much support the government is truly giving people, and how people are only, or in some cases, being supported by the government, which is, I think, his focus. And so, to that end, because again, if you go and look anything about Allen West, again, he's a Republican. He is. They always refer to him as a Tea Party candidate, so he'd be against big government. And so that's his point. You know, you got all these people being supported on government, and now government needs to be big. You know, there's a reason why they need taxes raised, because there's a lot more people getting government services, and they need to get money to be able to supply those people on government services. They need more money to be able to help even more people, which is why they want to raise taxes. The deficit thing is really just a distraction.
Well, then maybe more of the issue is, I mean, these people are being approved for disability. It's not like they are forcing the government to approve them for disability. So maybe the issue is exactly what they are doing to allow so many people to become approved in disability when they can actually go and get a job. They can actually, you know, I mean, considering so many people, you know, are having a difficulty, maybe because they can't find a job and they have had some type of disability for some degree, and they, you know, they just never applied for it. They decided to apply because they're having such a hard time. People have to eat, you know, so if they apply for it and they were approved, hey, what are you going to do? You know, you're going to blame them because they got approved by Social Security disability. It's not their fault they got approved. You know, granted, if it was more difficult to get in, or they had to prove something, or they had to actually do something to a greater degree of what they had, then they wouldn't have to. You know, there wouldn't be so many people that he's complaining about, you know, being in Social Security disability over this course of the economy.
I think at the end of the day, you know, his slavery rhetoric, he's obviously, he really just trying to get attention. You know, I mean, when you look at it like this, when is the last time you've seen a freshman congressman make this much national news? So I don't know whether he's making a ploy to get into the White House or what the situation is.
No, actually, he's at the moment. His name has been mentioned several times as a potential vice presidential candidate.
Exactly.
But to his knowledge, as he says, he is not being vetted for that particular position. Whereas there have been a lot of not a lot of individuals, but there's been one or two individuals who have at least admitted, you know, like Marco Rubio, he's admitted that he's been vetted for vice president. And Mitt Romney's wife, Ann Romney, has admitted that there's some females within the Republican Party that are being vetted for vice president. And so from his perspective, he has no idea, he says, of his being vetted for that position. So ultimately, he is, you know, I guess you could say he's out there speaking for what he believes to be the truth, at least as he sees it. And so that's where he comes from. So, you know, Allen West, man, if you follow him, you know, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I like his approach, sort of his background. He's a military guy, and now he's in Congress, and he's running for Congress again. And yes, he is making a lot of headways, kind of moving up in the ranks, if you will. People are noticing him. The comments certainly help, and he is getting a lot of support from that Republican community, Mr. Allen West. But yeah, slavery. I don't know. Like I said, the analogy may be bad, but what he's saying is very sound. Even one of the things, like in a clip on TV that it was in last night, one of the comments he made about this increase in people on Social Security disability, you know, one of the things that's happened under President Obama's tenure here, of course, is he's done a lot to fight for the payroll tax. That has been approved and is still approved at the moment. And of course, I'm sure at the end of the year when it expires, they'll be trying to get it reapproved again. But that payroll tax actually comes from money that would actually fund Social Security, the Social Security General Fund, the Social Security Disability Fund. That money is actually funneled for that. And so if we're cutting taxes by taking away money from that particular fund, you know, it begs the question, you know, well, how is this going to play out long term? Clearly, the number of people who are taking advantage of this money is increasing, but the money available for this fund is decreasing because we are continually passing a tax cut through that fund. So that was another question that he brought up, and how is the long-term impact of that going to be affected? Because that's something that, we love the tax cut, but where's it coming from? This is where it's coming from. It's coming from money that's designated for Social Security. And there has been no real increase in taxes to replenish that money. So it's truly being lost, and there will, of course, be loans eventually taken out to cover it. But that's where we are. So those are some of the issues that he raised. Alan West, again, if you're listening to locally, he's certainly not a congressman that you're going to be able to vote for. He's certainly not in any of our districts. But as a future candidate that seems to be bigger and better things, watch out. Alan West is the name. He's down there out of Palm Beach County in that particular area. I like the guy. I'd like to see him do bigger and better things. That's my opinion.
Of course you do,
Yeah,
Jimmy.
okay.
Of course.
Just cause all slaves.
And you don't call yourself a Republican.
That is correct. I'm not a Republican.
All right. All right.
407-894-1680 is the number. 407-894-1680 is that number. All right, we'll move on. Did you guys have any more final comments on Alan West you wanted to give? No? All right. Let's go on to our last topic here, which is going to be healthcare. So I wanted to recap some of the decisions the Supreme Court made, and then kind of discuss the impact of those decisions. My first question is, well, let me talk about what the Supreme Court said. So, of course, what was being argued is whether or not the mandate within the Affordable Health Care Act was constitutional. Okay, and one of the things that the government argued was that its constitutionality was basically due to the Commerce Clause. It allowed them to be able to mandate everyone buy insurance, and that the penalty, as they describe it in there, was also constitutional due to the fact that due to this Commerce Clause. And ultimately what was decided by the Supreme Court is that the Commerce Clause is not a constitutional, the Commerce Clause argument was not constitutional, is what they told them. They said, though, the mandate is okay, though, if you reference this as a tax. So as long as you're calling it a tax, then the mandate can be there and this law can stand, is one of the comments they made. The other thing that was big is that they decided, as a part of the law, it was mandated that states have to take part in the expansion of Medicaid that the law provides for in order to continue to receive federal funding. Well, the Supreme Court decided that that was also not constitutional, and so they said that states have the right to make their own decision as to whether or not they will participate in that expansion of Medicaid. And if they want to, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to, and that decision will not affect other federal funds that they may be due to receive. So that was big as well. So that was the comments kind of made by the Supreme Court. I'll catch you guys' opinion real quick. 407-894-1680. 407-894-1680 is the number. What were you guys thinking when you heard this particular decision?
Of course, for me, I thought it was a good thing. And I'm looking at it, it's going to benefit people in general. For those who don't have health insurance, and God forbid you ever get sick and you really need it, and those bills start coming in, then that's when it becomes real to people. Some of the good things about the actual bill was people with pre-existing conditions can no longer be dropped from a health insurance. I, for one, have had that happen to me, and it's not a good thing. It's not a good feeling at all. Children who are up to 26 can remain on their parents' health insurance. Again, those things came along before it was 25, and you're done and out shopping for health insurance. So there's some good things about it. I think it's being politicized, like everything else, with some of the amendments and the mandate. I'm sorry, not the amendments. The mandate of individual health care is supposed to benefit you as an individual in the country and save you from having to pay all this money if you ever do need health insurance.
All right, so that's Mr. Crazy opinion. Anybody else want to offer an opinion about it?
I'm definitely, especially being a behavioral health provider, because all of that wraps up into all types of medical and mental type of treatment. There are positives, like Ms. McCrae said. There are a lot of positives, especially there's state changes where they would be able to get benefits, and then there's also some things where if they don't participate, then they would lose some of those benefits, but that's a different thing. But I think, anytime anybody hears a tax, it's like a dirty word. Nobody wants to hear tax. and I feel the same way, especially being someone who didn't have health insurance, it's like while going to school, or different things like that. You could get student insurance to some degree, but, when you're in that interim of not being in school and not having a full-time job, ideally, that person would be taxed. And so that I'm not all for. Hopefully, they have a plan for being able to find a better insurance program, because the insurances out there now are very confusing. They're, you always have all these different types of deductibles and co-pays, and nobody really quite understands. I'm paying $200 a month to still pay a $2,500 deductible. And so that I hope they change if they're going to mandate or unofficially mandate.
No,
everyone.
there's no unofficial. It is a mandate.
Okay, so mandate through tax
Exactly.
the insurance for individuals, because that would make it unfair for people not to be able to find a solution that is affordable, and then still have to end up paying whatever size of the tax is, every year, if that was the case. So.
Okay. Well, and here's my thing though. My biggest question, I can't deny that some of the principles and the concepts that was set forth in the law, when you think about them from a moral perspective, that they're great, from a moral perspective. But these things aren't morally paid for either. These things are paid for with cash, or if you will. So somebody needs to have the cash to be able to provide all of these beautiful, lovely, moral sentiments. And my question here is, do we, as a nation, have the cash? When you look at what's happened just with the CBO, initially the CBO said the bill would cost approximately $900 billion. And within this year, they gave a new estimate of $1.6 billion. So the bill hasn't even been implemented, and the CBO says it's already going to cost almost twice as much what they initially said it would cost back in 2010. And so those are the questions I have. I look at it like your mortgage payment, right? So you think about your mortgage payment, you sign it, and let's say your mortgage, the bank comes to you and says, hey, guess what I'm going to do for you? I'm going to let you just pay $200. Now, the balance of the mortgage is still going to collect, and you're going to pay a higher interest rate on it. But for right now, just go ahead and pay $200. Now, morally, that sounds great. Like, oh, that's awesome. I only had to pay $200 where I was paying $1,200. But when you think about the consequences of you paying $200, now you're still paying that money, and not only are you paying it, you're now paying a higher interest rate than you initially were. So morally, it's a great idea. Sounds good. You're awesome, bank. But when you look at the back end of it, you're going to pay twice as much eventually over time than you would have paid had you just paid the $1,200 like you were supposed to. And that's kind of how I look at this law. Morally it sounds really good, but ultimately it's more than likely going to cost us more than what we're initially sold on. And so long term, is that going to be a good thing? I mean, what do you think about that? It's 407-894-1680 is the number. Go ahead, Ms. Monica.
I think it's going to, I hate to say this, but I think the government is treating this much like they treated all of our other benefits, like Social Security and other things, that eventually it's going to come back and get us if they don't do it responsibly, if they don't plan on, things being taken care of in a responsible manner. People, if this tax is really large, people will stop paying taxes and they'll end up in jail. Then they won't be collecting any taxes from anyone, and then they won't have funds to pay for this, and so on and so on and so on. So, it could spiral if they aren't responsible, and making sure that people are not, that they don't just revolt against this type of situation because they don't want to pay a tax, and so it can be complicated. I'm hoping, I'm praying definitely that, things will, they'll get some enlightenment on how to handle this responsibly.
So what does happen if they don't pay the tax?
It's just like any other taxes that you owe to the IRS.
You're gonna go to jail.
Over time, I'm sure if it builds up, it builds up. Eventually, they're gonna take you to court, and if you get convicted, I'm sure it's some jail time. Potentially might be. I mean, not everybody that gets brought up on tax charges goes to jail, but I mean, it's on the table. Sure, it's on the table.
But here's the thing: we're taxed on so many other things. I think it's the newness, and people don't like change. It's one more thing to have to be taxed about, but I think that's what's scaring people. It's like, oh, tax. But wait, we're taxed on everything anyway. So I don't, like you said, if they work it out so that it makes sense, I think the benefits will outweigh the bad things, for sure.
I don't think it's always an underlining, reading between the lines thing that's always going to get you. Personally, in my opinion. And
I guess I just have a different perspective on healthcare. When you're healthy, oh yeah, you don't even think about stuff. You're like, all right, I have this insurance I have to pay. Oh man, it sucks that I have to pay this and these deductibles. But when you're sick and have to deal with things and look at it from a whole nother issue, like I am, I take hold of everything, and I'm really paying attention to how this works on a level in real time. Not about, how the government's going to pay for it. I'm going to be taxed. How am I going to get this health care that I deserve, that I need to live, and then how is it going to be paid for so I'm not left in bankrupt?
Well, just to clarify, the tax only applies if you can afford health insurance and then can pay it. That's not what I'm really even referencing right now. What I'm just talking about is the overall cost that's going to be associated with the bill itself. So is the bill going to truly, quote unquote, pay for itself as the government contends it will? That's what I'm talking about. Not so much the tax, but we have a caller. How you doing tonight, caller?
Fine. I believe going to pay out in the long run. People, when you go to the store, you pay tax. When you go buy groceries, you pay tax. When you go to buy clothes, you tax. So it ain't going to pan out. I think people make all this money, still pay tax. Ain't nothing wrong with it. You make all this kind of money, you can pay taxes. Because Roman, he trying to raise, he want the rich, you don't want to pay the taxes for them, but the other he want to pay, that man is crooked. I heard some things about him, where he come from. I remember talking about me Roman. So they better be thinking.
All right, we appreciate that comment, caller. I thank you for that.
I
love it. She calls often these days. I appreciate her.
Thank you for listening.
So, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was saying, I just think it's a good idea in general, because the thing about it is, this law is just the first of its kind, so it's introduction. So
no, it's not. We have Medicaid, we have Medicare. They're the same principles.
It's not the same thing, man. You know that.
It is exactly the same thing.
What I'm saying is, though, it's going to get tweaked, and everything, and hopefully it will get to a point where it's more efficient. But I just think it's good. It's always good to introduce things that's to benefit the country as a whole, everybody as a whole.
Well, let me throw another question out here. You say it's going to get tweaked. When I think about the current kind of healthcare programs that we have, Medicaid, Medicare, certainly there have been changes to those programs, but I think it's also very obvious that the changes that have been made have not been effective in really solving the problems that those programs have. When I think about the expansion of Medicaid, a lot of Medicaid people, when you talk to them, I don't know a lot of Medicaid people who are just like thrilled totally thrilled about being on Medicaid. A lot of doctors don't like to take Medicaid patients because Medicaid, the government who pays their Medicaid bills, tends to pay them very late. So it takes months sometimes to catch their bills. So when you're considering, you're talking about change and all of these things. To me, how is this program going to be better than the program that already has problems that you're now expanding on top of the problems that it already has? Like, where do you find solutions in that situation? I don't see a solution. I just see another problem. Again, morally, when you think about it, it sounds good. More people, healthcare is going to be expanded through Medicaid. So more people are now eligible for Medicaid. So now more people are going to be able to get health insurance. That sounds great in principle, but again, it takes cash to fund these things. And, is the cash truly there? I mean, when you think about a country as a whole, we are approximately $15-16 trillion in debt, and we have yet to find a solution to even solve, that particular problem. So as we continue to expand programs that are underfunded and budgets that are we got $1 trillion deficits, which we expect to have for like the next 5 or 10 years. How is creating new programs who are adding to programs that we already have without actually making changes to fix the problems that those programs have? How is that a solution? Again, it sounds really good, and I'm not saying that it doesn't, and it makes people feel happy and smile on the inside, but at the end of the day, these things have to be paid for. We're living in a day and age where governments do fail. We're seeing it in our day and age, failing governments. So to say that it's really impossible for us to someday fail, I'm not saying that it's going to happen in the next 3 years. It may take another 20 to 30 years to do that, but if we're confounding those problems today and not ever solving those problems, what are we really doing? Yes, we're making people smile, but are we helping them?
You know what the biggest issue is, what's really going to cause our government to fail is the back and forth, the bickering. The repeal, trying to repeal this just because it's Obama's, just because it's a Democrat in office. Oh, we don't like it because it's his. Okay, what are your solutions? If you don't like it, if you want to repeal it, what are some solutions? What are you going to change about it? What would you like to add? There's no one says anything about that. They just know we're going to repeal it. It's not constitutional. The Supreme Court was wrong. So the back and forth of the tit for tat, if one side does something, then we turn the back on it. That's the part that's getting worse to me, that is bringing down this government. All this back and forth, it's not even about the people. It's about your party.
So bickering is bringing down. But I agree. There's way too much bickering going on. I'm there with you on that. But it almost sounds like you're coming from a one-sided perspective. I think the bickering is from both sides of the
That's
perspective.
what I'm saying. It's both.
And so
both sides.
It's both sides. And I think, going, and I don't want to rehash what happened back in 2010 when this was created, but I think that was one of the biggest issues with this in the first place, is that there was this bickering going on, and pretty much everybody stood their ground and said, well, it's kind of like, what happens in Florida. Right now, Republicans have the majority for the most part in the Florida House and the Senate. And so when the Republicans want to do something, they just go and do it. And so we saw that kind of same idea back in 2010. And so, that is a problem. But again, we're still not, as a country, addressing that issue of, if the programs that we're adding these people to already have problems, we're only confounding the problem by adding more people into those programs before we actually solve the problem of those programs. And then I'm not saying that we're going to see that immediately, but I think long term, if we're never addressing that, which we really aren't. We're talking about it, but we really aren't addressing it. I think there's going to be problems long term. Will the bill itself fail? Of course not. They'll do what they always do. They'll take out more loans to figure out how to get this stuff paid. So it's certainly not going to go away. But again, how many more loans do we going to take out? How big of a deficit does the budget every year need to be before we really start really talking and solving the problem, before we actually make some of those hard cuts that are going to make people frown, or raise the taxes on everybody, not just rich people, in order to help pay down some of this money that's being built up. So that's just something that I think people ought to be considering, even when you consider what benefits you get out of it. Yeah, it's great. It makes you smile, but there's a back end to this. At some point, some of this stuff has to get paid for. At some point, nobody lives with a deficit within their budget every year and continues to thrive for hundreds and hundreds of years. We see ourselves fall within 5 to 10 years because we are maybe $1,000 in deficit on our budget. So imagine a government who's building $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion of deficit year after year after year. What's going to happen to that? We need to address that, and we need to get serious about that. Another thing that I think people aren't thinking about when you think about the decision that was made with the Supreme Court is the fact that so this is approved simply because it was a tax that had to be paid. Okay, and I know everybody says this is a great idea. President Obama spearheaded it. Democrats supported it, and I'm certainly in the room with a lot of people who lean democratically. We'll say probably in the audience who leans democratically as well. But when you think about the concept of how this was approved, basically it was approved because it was a tax. So they said, because you're going to tax people because they're not going to participate in the program you say they should, it's okay. All right. And so I apply that to, okay, so what happens now? Now that the precedent has been set, that if the government deems it necessary for you to participate in something, when you choose not to participate in it, as long as they tell you they're going to tax you, it is okay for them to do that. Someone gave me a scenario today. They say, so you live in, let's say, in New York City, you don't have a car, so you're forced to take a bus. Well, the state says, hey, you need to have a car so we can help reduce the transportation problem. So what we're going to do is tax you because you don't have a car, and that way you'll help pay for this transportation system that you need to participate in. And constitutionally, that could potentially become true. Now, it seems a little far-fetched, I know, but this is the precedent, though, that has been set by this law. And so, that's something I don't even think we're thinking about. So what happens when the next Republican idea, which more than likely you will disagree with simply because it came from Republican, but that's neither here nor there. What happens when they bring an idea to the table that they deem fair because they are taxing you? Is that going to now be okay? Are we going to now accept that as, I guess it is what it is, and that's what needs to happen? These are some of these consequences that I don't think we're even considering when you talk about the Supreme Court passing this particular law based on the fact that it's a tax. You guys have any comments on that one?
I think it's one of those underlining statements that I was talking about. I think it's a lot that's going to happen because of this one bill. You got a caller?
No, actually, the caller just wanted to ask a question and say, well, Ron did the same thing. What you think about that?
Well, go ahead. What were we going to say? I'll answer that caller's question.
Go ahead.
Well, what I think about that, because that's another one of the criticisms that's been going on is, well, in Massachusetts, he voted a plan like this into action. Well, this is what I have to say about that. Number one, I don't live in Massachusetts. I live in Florida. And so what happens in Massachusetts happens in Massachusetts. And so if I was in Massachusetts, I'd probably been upset that he did that. But I don't live in Massachusetts. I live in the state of Florida. So in the state of Florida, I say, I don't want this. In Massachusetts, they said they want this. And so that's what I think about that. And so the fact that he did that in Massachusetts, well, it ain't got nothing to do with me because I don't live in Massachusetts. And so that's how I feel about that. But, as far as it relates to where we are today, as far as what he says, and politicians, you take them at their word for whatever their word is.
Oh, really?
And I'm not saying, there's any truth to his word, but according to what he says he's going to repeal it. But what does that have to do with where we are today? We're at not Obamacare, I'm sorry. We're at the Affordable Care Act. That's what we're talking about. And so the decision is it okay for something that one state did to now apply that to all 50 states? In my opinion, what happens in Massachusetts stays in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, it's legal for gays to get married. So what are we saying now in the state of Florida, since they had that in Massachusetts, we should now allow gays to get married in the state of Florida as well? I doubt if you put that on the ballot box that they're going to vote for that. So what happens in Massachusetts is Massachusetts. What happens in the state of Florida is in the state of Florida. And unless the Floridians vote this in, then I think it should not be imposed upon them. That's exactly what I think. That's what I think about Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. Caller.
Well, it was actually the previous caller that said that, but I think she, in relation, she believes that he probably will apply it to the country as well. But
Since he did it to Massachusetts.
since he did it as a governor,
Well, and then
failed as a
too,
governor.
when you go back and you look at what happened, Massachusetts at that time was a democratically dominated House and Senate. And so who brought it to the table? The democratically dominated House and the Senate. Now, they did have a Republican governor, but let's put you in that seat. You're the Republican governor. There are the majority Democrats in the House, majority Democrats in the Senate. They've passed this bill to you, and now you're going to step out on a ledge all by yourself and veto this bill, whether or not you agree with it? I'm not saying that.
Shouldn't he if he didn't?
Hey, well, that's the question. That's the question. What would you do in that situation?
If I didn't believe in it, I would have vetoed it
Okay.
as my
And then
power.
and then you would have been one of the most hated men in that state as governor.
I mean,
And who wants that? There's no politician that's going to step out and be that bold.
But see,
President
here we-
Obama
but
wouldn't
he-
step
but here
out
we
and
go,
be that
though.
bold.
But
None of them will step out and be that
but I'm
bold.
saying that here we go. We playing political games instead of doing what we feel is best for the people.
So what makes that different when he's president?
Exactly.
Right.
What makes that different in this president?
When
If he-
if he becomes president, the same games that he played.
Is that what he gonna do? If he go, you think he gonna do what's best for what he feels is best for the people, or he gonna play political games?
Yeah.
Oh, all of them play some political games.
No,
So-
all of them play all political games.
Exactly. All of them play some political games. So that's to be expected. That's not what we're talking about. Of course they're going to play political games. That's what they do.
Unfortunately,
But
Bush didn't play political games. He
Well, of
did
course
what
he
he
did.
felt was right at that time.
Which
Hey, I don't feel like. Hey, I feel like we need to go to war. What he did, he went to war. It wasn't no political game. It was just that's what he
It was
felt
a
like
game,
was right for the
because
people.
he can't go to war without Congress, and so Congress approved for him to go to
Right.
war. So
And
there
it just so
was a game
happened he
involved. He
owned
didn't.
oil.
he
Yeah,
didn't
it was a
mandate-
game. It was a game. That's why he
didn't
retired.
mandate
It was an
Right.
underlining game, but at
It
the
was
same
a
time,
game.
it wasn't what was right for the people. He
Had to
just
do
did
with
what
net
he felt
worth.
like. And that's what he felt like I'm gonna do.
Again.
I'm gonna do what I feel like I gotta do because that's what I need to do.
He did it with the Congress's approval. But again, the point here is not about political games. The point here is what's right for the country. That's what we're discussing. We know that they play political games, but just because they play political games don't make things right. It still brings into question some of the underlying things that are going to happen.
Well,
And
I
so
think it's
to say that it's right because everybody plays a political game, that's not a validated statement.
No.
That makes all the games that they play wrong. That makes any rules or any games that are won based on these political games wrong. And what we should be demanding is not the same. We should be demanding more of these people. And stop expecting them to play political games and saying, well, it's okay because the next guy was going to do it anyway. No,
Well, let
they
me
need
say
to
this.
be taken to task for the decisions that they make. They need to be called out on the decisions that they make. And that's what we need to do when we're electing people into office. For everyone that thinks this was a bad law, I'm pretty sure that if they voted for a congressman who supported this law, that vote for that congressman is going to be lost, and that's how you make your decisions known. But you don't say, well, somebody is going to play a political game, so that's okay with me. No, that's not acceptable.
Well-
It's not acceptable. We need to be expecting and demanding more of these individuals, so that
Please pick
solutions
Jeremy,
can be done.
Please.
Go ahead,
We
sir.
pick
Thank you. Can your brother talk? Thank you. What I was saying, I
Brothers
do
always
believe
talk.
it's right. I do believe this is right. And how we gonna pay for it? The same thing we pay for everything else. We find a way. We find a way. If we can find a way, I done said this previous times on this show. If we can find a way to go to war, we should be able to find a way to help people. That's all I'm saying.
And we should be able to find a way to send the country broke trying to help people.
Hey,
I'm not
no,
saying you
no,
shouldn't
no.
help people.
I'm not.
But
This
you
is what I'm
still
saying.
have to.
Well, I don't
you still
think
have to
necessarily
do
you
it
go send the country
responsibly. That's the
broke.
thing. You
Yeah,
still
yes,
have to
you-
do it
yes, you-
responsibly.
You are
And
correct.
this particular bill, when you look at it, it is not being responsible. When you look at the fiscal things that are happening with this bill, it is not being responsible, and that's my biggest point about this bill. Is it sounds good and it sounds great and it puts smiles on people's faces, and we love smiles on people's faces. We love that. Congressmen love that because it means they're going to catch another vote. And people love that because it means people are going to be happy. But at the end of the day, we need to be responsible. Just like we're responsible in our homes when we create our budgets, we need to be responsible, and we need to send individuals who are in Washington, who are in Tallahassee, who are in any other of these state capitals. We need to let them also be responsible. Sometimes that means they're going to make a decision that you're not going to like. Sometimes that means the middle class are going to have to get a tax increase. Sometimes that means the rich people are going to have to get a tax increase. But if it's the responsible thing to do, sometimes that's what needs to happen. And that's what we need to demand of these people, whomever they are. If they're the Republicans, Democrats, Independents, that's the discussion. Responsibility. Smiles are great, but we need responsibility. We need the same responsibility we expect of ourselves, of the government. And that's the bottom line. We're running down on time as always. It's always great discussions. I love you guys. So I got a couple of announcements I want to make. Statements.
I don't remember no discussions.
All discussions. All discussions. Whatever. A couple of things I want to make. A couple of announcements I want to make real quick before we go here. Next Tuesday, July 17th, there's going to be a clay event at the Experience Christian Center. And that clay event is going to be about de-stressing your summer. De-stressing your summer. So, you know, you kind of feel kind of stressed. The kids are out, you know, they're not in school. That kind of gets stressful sometimes because you got to run them back and maybe and forth from those camps and whatnot. So they got some things going on to help you de-stress your summer, help prepare to get you ready for going back to school, and some ideas on some stress-free travel. So that'll be next week, July 17th at the Experience Christian Center. So go and check that out next week as well. As always, it's been a pleasure. Real Family Talk every Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter, Real Family Talk. You can find us on Facebook, Real Family Talk. You can also find us on YouTube, Real Family Talk. And of course, we have our website, realfamilytalk.weebly.com. Got a new blog up about George Zimmerman, making some comments about George Zimmerman. So in my opinion, I think it's time to leave a man alone, move on, let the process take its course, and let's see what's going to happen. When he actually does go to trial. All this conjecture before the trial needs to stop. It means nothing. It means nothing. It means nothing until the case itself begins. Real Family Talk. This is your host, Jay Real.
WOKB, Winter Garden, Orlando.